I'm here talking with Jeff Busgang. He's with Flybridge Capital Partners, which is a venture capital firm, right?
Yes, we're based here in New York City and in Boston as well.
Are you here because you're looking for Bitcoin businesses to invest in? I want to know all about what you do, but first of all, have you invested in any Bitcoin businesses so far?
We have not. We've invested in a lot of payments companies. Flybridge does seed and Series A investing, and one of our areas of focus has been in financial services and payments. So companies like Plastic, which is a credit card payments company for large ticket purchases, and other financial companies like Zest Finance, which is a consumer lender, Blue Tarp, which is a lender in the construction industry. So we like the category a lot, but we have not yet invested in a Bitcoin-focused startup.
What's holding you back from investing in Bitcoin startups?
It is still murky for a number of reasons. One is the regulatory overhang is a concern. We, as investors, try to avoid businesses that have regulatory risk because it's so binary. You can build great technology, but if the regulators kill the business, you get zero value out of it.
Yeah.
Secondly is we're looking for platform opportunities where we can build very large companies, and there are only a few areas we think where that's possible. So we're, as venture investors, we're looking for the billion-dollar ideas, not the $10 million ideas or even the $100 million ideas. We need to see the billion-dollar ideas. And there are actually very, very few of those in general, and even fewer in the Bitcoin sphere. Now, that's a reflection maybe of how young this market is, but I'm here because I'm bullish on the market in the long term, and I want to make sure that I'm learning about it and meeting people who are smart about it and getting a perspective on it that could be helpful down the road.
In the payment services industry, it's been around longer, and it sounds like at least things are clear, from a regulatory standpoint. Is that kind of where you're coming from? Whereas with Bitcoin, it's really not clear?
Yeah, when you think about a venture capital investment, you think about risk management. We're investing in little companies with immature business models, immature technology, sometimes immature management teams, but that's a whole other topic. And you want to make sure that you're reducing risk. And if you've got ecosystem risk, which Bitcoin arguably has, I'm personally bullish on it, but any objective observer would say there's ecosystem risk, and you've got regulatory risk, it makes for a difficult environment to invest in. All that said, I am bullish on the category, and I think it's a great time, since we look 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, in the next year or two, it's a great time to be learning about the category, maybe making some small investments and dipping one's toe in the market.
Mm-hmm. So you really think this has potential to grow a lot in the future?
I think it has tremendous potential. I think the concerns aside, the notion from a high level of a currency that transcends national boundaries, that reduces friction, that reduces transaction costs, that disrupts the ecosystem of dinosaurs in the financial services industry, I think that's a thesis that everybody can agree with.
Do you personally have Bitcoins? Do you invest in Bitcoins themselves?
I do. As part of my work, I've, for fun, been trading a little bit in Bitcoin, so I've got a couple Bitcoins sitting on my iPhone 5, which I occasionally check the price and the ticker and keep an eye on what's going on, but just as a way of creating accounts and experiencing the system and the service.
I have to say, I've been in academia and in science for a while, and I was not spending those years thinking much about investments or anything like that. But Bitcoin was kind of my first foray into what you could do with some intelligent investments, I guess you could say.
Yeah, almost every major technology development, you could look at the ecosystem in the early days and say it was a hobbyist ecosystem. You can look at the PC industry back when Bill Gates and Paul Allen bought their little rickety PC and programmed operating systems and played around with DOS. At the time, it was a hobbyist industry. You can look at even the 3D printing more recently industry, which is just now converting from a hobbyist industry to mainstream. And Bitcoin, as many poo-poo it as a hobbyist field, but that's how pioneers begin. So anytime you want to be on the bleeding edge, not the leading edge, but the bleeding edge, you've got to deal with some of these immaturities and risks, and that's the essence of innovation. It's the essence of venture capital. It's the essence of the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
In hearing you talk about it, it feels really exciting. In a world that's very new, this is really exciting because of where it could go, and we can't even think of where it could go. So, okay, one last question I want to ask is, as a venture capitalist, what qualities would you look for in a Bitcoin company when you're ready to start investing in them that would make them a winner?
It begins with the founder. We love investing behind founders with vision that are exceptionally talented and have the ability to execute on that vision. Second, it goes to the market opportunity. Is it a platform approach? Is it a big market opportunity with an attractive business model? And third, is there some proprietary or unfair advantage? Why would this company win as opposed to 3 other great entrepreneurs in Beijing or Bangalore or Silicon Valley? Because there's always going to be competitors when something exciting and new and successful emerges. So those are the kinds of attributes we look for that magic intersection of opportunity and company and entrepreneur.
Want to set up an online store that accepts Bitcoins? Go to openbitcoinstore.com and you can have a store up and running before the end of this message. Just enter your email address and the store name, and in less than 30 seconds, you'll have a secure WordPress e-commerce site up and running that accepts Bitcoins and pays you in cash within 24 hours. And best of all, it's completely free. Go to openbitcoinstore.com today and open for business now.
Over the past several months, we've all been experiencing a lot of ups and downs with Mt. Gox, and it has become a bit of the bane of our existence here in Bitcoin. So several months ago, one aspiring Bitcoiner put out a call to arms and a call to action and asked other similarly minded programmers to come to his aid in order to build a better Bitcoin exchange. And out of that community effort came Buttercoin. Well, Buttercoin now has some new announcements, and I'm delighted to have with us today Cedric Dahl, the CEO of Buttercoin, to tell us a bit about how far Buttercoin has come from that first call to action. Cedric, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I hear you have a very big announcement on Monday, and Buttercoin has evolved a bit from the basic concept of building a very scalable and high-performance exchange engine. Can you tell us where we're going with this today?
Yes. So Buttercoin is launching a white label Bitcoin exchange service that makes it easy for organizations to instantly deploy a robust Bitcoin exchange anywhere in the world with the touch of a button.
So by white label, you mean that they can essentially brand this with their own business name and start operating an exchange without any of the technical experience or infrastructure necessary to run the actual exchange hardware?
That's right. So we take care of all the hard work so they don't have to.
All right. So can you tell us a bit about the white label exchange experience? What does Buttercoin bring to the table that someone who wanted to open an exchange would not have to do themselves?
Sure. So as you probably know, compliance is a big deal in the Bitcoin space, especially in America. You're finding that there's a lot of activity happening around compliance and making sure that people who are having businesses and exchanges with Bitcoin are able to be compliant. And so you're in this interesting space where a lot of the folks who have the required licenses want to get into the space, but they don't know how. In other countries where the rules aren't necessarily as stringent, you have aspiring entrepreneurs who want to launch Bitcoin exchanges, but they might not have the technical chops. And what we wanted to do is enable all of these people. Everybody in every country who is legally able to run a money service business, we wanted to make it easy for them to put up a Bitcoin exchange without having to worry about the technology, without having to worry about jump starting the liquidity on their exchange. Ultimately, we put our heads together and we thought, hey, what's the best way to make Bitcoin work? What's the best way to create a robust system where people can access Bitcoins worldwide while also helping them deal with compliance in whatever specific way their country requires them to? And our solution was this white label Bitcoin exchange. I can talk a little bit more about how we got here if you'd like, because where we ended up was not anywhere near where we intended to go, but I think that what we're doing is actually probably the best way to secure Bitcoin's future.
Tell us a bit about the history. I remember in the beginning, the primary goal was simply to provide a performance exchange engine. And certainly the first indications were that you were able to bring to the table something that could do hundreds of thousands or even millions of transactions per second. So tell me a bit about more how that journey changed.
That's right. When we first started, what we wanted to do was remove the existential risk from Bitcoin. So we want Bitcoin to work. And after Mt. Gox crashed, we recognized that a big part of that crash was the low performance on the Mt. Gox trade execution engine. So we came out with a high performance trade execution engine that was open source. And our idea was that anybody could use this. You could take it, you could run your Bitcoin exchange with it, and it would allow you to limit lag time. I think at the peak of activity on Mt. Gox, when the price was approaching 260, we were seeing lag times of an hour and a half. And as you know, lag time leads to illiquidity, which leads to people getting scared and selling their stocks, well, in this case, their Bitcoins, and the price of Bitcoin crashing. And so, initially what we were doing is really just creating this software that anybody could use. And as we put it out there and we started talking to various exchanges, we found that the major players, for the most part, just were not willing or able to integrate Buttercoin or something like it into their system. They just, for the most part, didn't have the technical chops. And so we quickly realized that if we wanted an exchange to exist that was robust, we were going to have to build it ourselves.
Software was not enough. You had to build the entire end-to-end infrastructure and integrate it.
That's right. So as we started building this, we realized there were a couple of big hurdles. And the two biggest ones, being based in America, were having a bank account, which is a necessary mechanic of having an exchange. Mm-hmm. And the second one was being licensed, because as people have seen with the recent subpoenas from New York and Mt. Gox getting, basically focused in on by the Department of Homeland Security, if you're going to play the financial services game, you have to play by the rules. And if you don't, governments will come down on you. And so as we were going through this exercise, we effectively built this complete Bitcoin exchange where the only thing that was missing was plugging in a bank account. The Bitcoin exchange was designed with compliance in mind, security, performance, and liquidity. And so we tackled a lot of these big problems, but the last element that we weren't able to complete was having a bank account. Effectively, we reached out to 76 different banks, and all of them effectively said, we just cannot open a bank account for a digital currency exchange, especially one related to Bitcoin.
Wow.
We even had our investors, and we have top tier investors, call up these different banks, and the banks just flat out said, hey, we would love to open an account, but we just cannot. And our backers include people like Google Ventures, Y Combinator, Floodgate. These are high-level, top-tier investors that have billions of dollars in these banks. And even with billions of dollars in these banks, the banks said no. They could not open new bank accounts for Bitcoin companies. We even tried to work with the Internet Archive Credit Union, and unfortunately, we just were not able to open up a bank account. Now, in parallel to talking to these 76 different banks, we were getting phone calls from people who mistakenly thought that we had a white label Bitcoin exchange. And so after getting about a dozen of these calls, we stopped and asked ourselves, hey, what would happen if we combined this idea of a white label Bitcoin exchange with what we have, which is a Bitcoin exchange that all it needs is to plug in a bank account? What we realized is, wow, we're sitting on something really powerful here, because what you could do is you could have a pop-up Bitcoin exchange where anybody with the right kind of bank account in any country could instantly deploy an instance of Buttercoin. And then we looked at how currency worked across borders, and we recognized that as long as each country had their own unified order book, that what you could do is you could very easily create a system that was super robust, where even if for whatever reason one of these exchanges shut down, it wouldn't affect the community or the country's access to Bitcoin.
Tell me a bit more about this idea of the shared order book within the context of one currency or one nation. This is fascinating.
The goal is to create access to liquidity, which is robust and ideally will withstand any unexpected issues. So whether one specific person has issues with their bank account, or a government decides that they are no longer interested in a specific region having access to Bitcoin, what we wanted to do is just make a system that could last, that could deal with unexpected issues and not go down. Like if one part of it went down, it wouldn't affect the whole system.
Beyond just kind of resilience to a complete collapse of one of the exchanges within a region, I'm assuming that this shared order book will also lead to, even without one of them failing, it would also mean that new ones starting up can get access to the liquidity that's already there. But also I'm assuming it would also make for smoother price discovery and less difference in price between different exchanges. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. So phase one is have shared order books within each country. And then phase two, which is a little bit off, is to build a truly global unified order book. And that's technically and legally a little more complicated, but that's the next big problem we're solving.
So right now we're seeing an environment where Mt. Gox has an almost 20% difference in price on the USD currency from most of the other exchanges. And, to put a bit of speculation on that, essentially the market is saying that a Mt. Gox dollar is worth less because it's harder to get out of the exchange. And as a result, it's pricing the sale of Bitcoins a bit higher. So in an environment where you had a shared order book, essentially that would be arbitraged away between Gox and the other exchanges, correct?
That's right. The nice thing about what we're doing is we're not just opening up multiple exchanges in one country or allowing other people to. We're also bringing in professional market makers. And these market makers are able to ensure that there are very narrow spreads between the bid and the ask, as well as making sure that every exchange that starts in each new country is able to start with a high level of Bitcoin liquidity, which is really important. You can't just build an exchange and hope people come. You have to seed it with fiat dollars on one side and Bitcoins on the other.
Otherwise, it won't be able to grow through the first influx of customers.
That's right.
It sounds from all of this that you've somewhat given up on the idea of opening your own exchange with all of the hassle and difficulty of the 76 banks declining you. Does that mean you've more or less given up on the United States as a location and are looking for most of your white label customers to be in other countries?
We are tenacious and we never quit. Really what this is about is moving quickly and getting set up in places where you can have easy wins. That doesn't mean we're scared off by the difficulty in the US. We have 2 potential partners in the United States that we're going through diligence with now. You're going to see Buttercoin launching in 3 countries within 3 months. Within 6 months, we'll be in 9 countries. And the US is going to be one of those 9 countries. Now, there's a couple ways that you can go about getting licensed in the US, and that's really not the problem. The big issue is the bank account. What you're going to find is that the United States is going to come out with some ruling on Bitcoin in about 4 months. They kicked off a report to interview experts. That's a big part of what the New York subpoenas were about, is just interviewing experts and making sure that regulators and the folks in charge, as it were, understand what Bitcoin is. At the end of those 4 months, you're going to see the US say something. Now, I suspect, and this is just speculation on my behalf, I suspect that the US is going to say, hey, Bitcoin's legal and it needs to be regulated, and here's how to do it. And so when that happens, you're going to find a lot less friction in terms of setting up a bank account. If we haven't already signed up with partners that have bank accounts and are legally licensed before then we'll definitely be setting up after that announcement.
In terms of the performance and the capabilities of the white label service you have today, how would you compare it to the existing volume of trade that occurs on the 3 or 4 top exchanges, Mt. Gox, Bitstamp, and CampBX for the US dollar at the moment? Would you be able to support that kind of volume right away?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to connect you with Bennett Hoffman, who's the technical architect of our system. He can talk about the tech side better than I can. But yes, as far as we understand, we have the fastest system by several orders of magnitude, and it will be able to handle worldwide liquidity. I mean, even if every person in the world was using Bitcoin and they were getting their Bitcoins, buying and selling through Buttercoin, you wouldn't see a performance delay.
A great promise. Let's see it happen. When do you expect, as a customer or as a consumer, I will be able to experience a Buttercoin white labeled exchange?
Depends on what country you're in. We're pretty far along in terms of countries like India and Canada, in terms of having partners there who are in the right place and able to plug in and launch exchanges. Within 3 months, you're very likely to see something in a place like India, Canada, and the US. And then afterwards, you're very likely to see exchanges in places like Hong Kong and Brazil. So we already have deals in place. And really what's going on now is just going through the due diligence, making sure that when we do launch, we have a rock solid relationship with each bank that's plugged into the Buttercoin exchange.
I think it's instructive that it takes tremendous audacity to stand up 4 months ago and say, we can build a better, more performant exchange. At the same time, it's part of the course because it takes tremendous audacity to stand up and say, we're going to build a currency to rival all of the world currencies. And that's exactly the kind of audacity we need in this space. So thank you very much for all of your effort and for bringing this great team to bear. With us today, we had Cedric Dahl, CEO of Buttercoin, telling us about the new exciting space of the white label exchange, where people will be able to open exchanges with robust technology infrastructure through Buttercoin. Cedric Dahl, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Cheers.